Let's talk about entrepreneurship. It's the light bulb moment from your first big idea. It's the decision to set out on a new path. It's the realization that entrepreneurship starts with a spark, and that spark starts here. At the Stu Clark Center, we're here to nurture your ideas and help spark your entrepreneurial spirit. How? How about competitive opportunities to free your inner entrepreneur? Advice from venture coaches who have walked the walk, or some of the best networking events you'll find on campus. You'll find it all right here. By focusing on education, awareness, community, coaching, and connection, we build strong relationships with our students and do everything we can to help them on their journey to self-starting. At the Stu Clark Center, we thrive when you thrive. No idea is too big or too small. The Stu Clark Center is your one-stop shop for everything you need to start your journey. So why not start today?
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We're talking about business plan essentials. Great to have you all with us, and excited to talk about this great topic, an important conversation when it comes to entrepreneurship and building a business. Let's dive in. Before we do get started, though, just a couple of housekeeping items and Zoom etiquette reminders. Video is optional. However, we do ask that you please stay on mute throughout the webinar. You can use the chat function to ask any questions. We will have a Q&A period at the end, but feel free to pop a question in the chat at any point in time during the webinar. And lastly, but not least, this webinar will be recorded, as are all of our webinars, and they will be uploaded to our online resources section of our website. So if you need to leave early, no problem, or if you want to rewatch it, you absolutely can. I'd like to quickly introduce to you our team at the Stu Clark Center. Deborah Jonasson-Young, our director, Lindsay Friesen, our program coordinator, and my name is Joshua Zapperzan, and I'm the venture coach at the Stu Clark Center, and I will be moderating this webinar for you today. If you have any questions about the Stu Clark Center whatsoever, about what we do, or more importantly, how we can help you in your entrepreneurial journey, please do not hesitate at any point to reach out to any one of us. We're here to help and support you. You can find us online, umanitoba.ca/entrepreneur, and also on Instagram at Stu Clark Center. You can stay up to date on all the latest news, updates, upcoming events, upcoming webinars, and everything that you need to know. On that note, as the venture coach, I have the opportunity to work with students across the university and help them assist with business plan development, a topic that we're talking about today, help talk about ideas, and provide some support, guidance, and mentorship and coaching to students. So if you have any questions, or have a business idea, or have a business plan, or have more questions about your business plan, feel free to book a meeting with me, and happy to help and answer your questions and walk you through that. I'm an entrepreneur myself today. I've built a lot of different business plans, and I've read a lot of different business plans, so I'm excited to share some of my experience with you as we walk through this conversation today. Before we get into it, I mentioned our webinars are recorded. If you scroll down to our website on the homepage, you'll see this upcoming webinars section. It shows the upcoming webinars, as well as you can hit that red button and find all of the previous recordings. That's where you can find them. Speaking of upcoming webinars, we have a great lineup of some really exciting upcoming webinars. The next one is on October 13th about preparing and delivering the perfect pitch. We've got a really great webinar planned on November 10th about grants and non-dilutive funding. November 24th, we have a guest speaker coming in, which I'll talk about in a few more seconds, and some other really great webinars upcoming. So I encourage you to check out online, see our full lineup, and RSVP to the ones that look of interest to you. Speaking of November 24th, we're super excited to invite Hamza Khan. He's an award-winning, multi-award-winning marketer, best-selling author, and global keynote speaker. He's joining us on November 24th to talk about turning ideas into action, defeating procrastination, and unlocking breakthrough productivity. As the webinar itself, ideas themselves aren't worth much. It's really the ability to execute them that matters. And in this dynamic session with Hamza, you're going to receive this action-oriented insight that you didn't get in school, highlighting real-world best practices for making ideas happen. So you're not going to want to miss it. So feel free to RSVP. That webinar will not be recorded. So if you'd like to attend, you're going to have to attend live. Okay, so today, let's dive in. Today is all about the business plan. We're going to talk about a few different types of business plans. We're going to talk about key components of a business plan. We're going to look at some other business plan essentials, and then we're going to look into the lean canvas and break that down, tell you what that is and how great of a tool that is, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So beginning, types of business plans. There's two different ways to categorize business plans. You can either categorize them by scope or by type. Categorizing them by scope, meaning internal versus external. So is it an internal document that you're using for strategy, for business planning internally with your team, or is it a document that's used for external purposes, such as raising financing or funding outside of your company? Secondly, you can categorize a business plan by type, whether it's a lean plan or a standard plan. A lean plan, which we'll talk about more later, but it's very high level, less details, but just most important, more summary items, versus a standard plan that's a lot more in depth and in more detail. The four kind of breakdown of these types: that lean plan really meant to track and grow, that standard plan that's meant for those more bigger reasons, such as getting funding. There's those one-pager executive summaries, quick overviews of your overall business plan for someone to just learn and get a quick understanding of your business plan. And then within that, there's also feasibility plans, strategic plans, marketing plans, all different subsections of one of those larger standard business plans. Why do I say this to you? Is because at the end of the day, the most important item before you start to actually write a business plan and build a business plan is to understand why in the first place you need a business plan and what you're going to use it for. Without understanding why you need a business plan, you're not going to be able to then write the proper business plan for that reason. So it's very important to understand that going into this process about the type of plan you need, the level of detail that's going to be required for those needs, which is going to help you understand what needs to be done in order to execute it. Super important to do this, not only to make it a quality business plan, but also to get the most from it, as well as to make the most out of your time as an entrepreneur as well and your resources. So a business plan should be compelling, practical, and for these reasons, you have to have a thorough and in-depth knowledge of your industry, the idea that you're selling. This includes knowledge of your target market, the particular problem that your idea is solving, your anticipated revenues, the competition, your rival products, and the uniqueness of your idea, among so many other things. I've broken it down into four main sections and key components. The first one, and we're going to go into these in more detail throughout the webinar, but I'll give you a high-level overview here. That first section is the overview of your plan. So this includes your executive summary and that really high-level information about your company. The second layer of a business plan really then dives into the market, the analysis of the market research, the target market, who your target market is, the validation that you've done to validate that that actually is your target market and that your business, there's a problem exists and that your solution is needed. And then your marketing plan to actually launch, grow, and scale your business, to build awareness and to take your product or service to market. That third layer is the operations and the financials. This is where the meat of the plan comes into play with the actual execution of the business, your human resources, your key people, your key employees, your advisory board. What's your actual plan to implement, to operate, to scale? What does your timeline look like? This includes financial projections and any legal components as well, such as any intellectual property that you might have and the legal and corporate structure of your business. Finally, that last layer is the appendix, the conclusion, supporting graphs, supporting elements, figures, research, data, statements, profiles, whatever it might be, that really kind of holds the meat of everything together and brings the whole plan together to support it with additional resources. All of these components make for a strong, compelling, and cohesive plan, and it's important to note how this flows, because flow is important, and it's important to know on a high level what needs to go into a business plan before you then decide on the level of depth that's required for each of these sections. This is the infographic that I've built that I use with all of my clients and students in terms of how to build a business plan. And it is kind of, as you follow the arrows, a starting point to an end point, and important to follow that process. This takes those 4 sections we just talked about on the previous slide and breaks it down into a little bit more detail so you can see some of the more specific items within each section that's crucial to be, excuse me, that's crucial to be discussed upon and written about within your plan. Starting with that executive summary, moving into that company overview of understanding your mission, your vision, the problem statement, your solution. Moving to that market analysis and research stage, so defining your target market, really doing an analysis and an overview, then developing your marketing plan, your human resource plan, your operation and implementation plan, your legal, your financial. So it all comes together and they're all built on one other piece. And if there's one thing that I stress, it's don't just go straight to the financial analysis. Don't just go straight to the operation plan when you're building a business plan. It's super important to work through these in this order because they all relate to each other. You can't build proper financial projections without understanding your industry and the market and knowing the size of the market and your target market. You can't build financials or an operation plan without knowing your marketing plan or your implementation plan. So it's very, very important to move in order. So let's dive in deeper now into each one of these sections. So that first section is that overview piece, that super important, high level, introductory, important. It's the first thing your reader is going to see and read. It's to get them hooked. This is your executive summary. So the summary of your mission, the problem that you're solving, your solution to that problem, which is your business that you're selling, whether it be a product or service, the high level analysis of the market, and then your business model and financial description, essentially how you're going to make money. Now, executive summary at times should only be between 1 to 2 pages, depending on the length of detail and the type that you need, especially if it's part of a larger business plan. You want to keep it short, to the point, and high level. Secondly, after the executive summary, you move into the company overview. So this is where you start to get into, okay, what's the actual problem statement that we're solving? What is the root problem? We talked about defining the root problem in a previous webinar, and it's super important to state that here. Outlining your solution, not only what your solution is, but most importantly, how it solves and addresses the problem that you just listed. And then you define your value proposition, which is super, super important. A value proposition is what makes you and your business unique. Your clear and compelling message that states why you are different and why you and your product are worth buying rather than everyone else. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs can't properly define their value proposition. So I encourage you to take time and get that right. Be specific and really understand what makes you and your business unique. Why is there value to what you're selling versus everyone else? And that needs to be clear and compelling in a statement. So my point is, don't rush that. Don't overlook it. It's very important. That second big piece is our market analysis. So this is our high-level overview of the market. The first big chunk of this is to deep dive into the actual market of your business. So looking at the industry, the analysis of the industry, providing factual data, that will help to show the size of the market and the key pieces of information about the industry, such as what are the trends in this industry, anything that's relevant to your product and service. Now, it's so important, again, to provide factual data, to provide numbers, to provide actual research on the industry, to understand the size of it and the scope of it. Your findings and validation is really what you've done to validate your idea. Have you performed a survey? Have you spoken to those that you've identified in your target market? Have you actually done research and have proof that supports that your product and service will be a success in the market? Who have you spoken to about your idea? What was the feedback? You don't have to go speak to thousands of people, but you need to speak to the right people. And you need to have the right feedback and the right mechanisms in place to support your idea and your solution in the marketplace. Then there's that analysis. It's really, okay, let's take these findings. Let's take what we found in the industry. Why is this market segmentation the right one for you? Based on what you've learned and what you've heard from others, what have you concluded? And then target market is really describing, again, in detail who your ideal customer is, how many of them exist in the world within different markets, and quantifying that. It is super, super important. It's also important to note when you talk about target markets that there's a difference between someone that makes a purchase decision versus an end user. And sometimes, depending on the product or service, those could be two different people and two different target markets within a business. And so it's super important to get that right, describe that clearly, and know who exactly it is that you're selling to, and building your plan around that. Following this deep dive, it's really then about your marketing plan. So how are you going to actually build awareness and launch your product within the marketing world to get people to purchase and be aware of what it is you're selling? For this, we kind of look at, I know it's a traditional way of looking at it, but just the 4 Ps of product, price, promotion, place. What is your product? How much are you selling for? How and where, or how are you going to promote it? And also, where are you going to promote it? Where are people going to see it? Where are people going to be able to purchase it from? Further to this, it's so important to be able to understand the strategy, service and warranty, as well as any customer retention strategies that you're going to have in place. The strategy is really describing your marketing plan and strategy in detail, including potential strategic partnerships. Are you going to work with influencers? Are you going to develop a partnership with a third-party company that's maybe somewhat similar, or where you could have cross-promotional activities? What's any alliances or distribution strategies or different campaign strategies? It's important to note too that from a strategy perspective, you really need to develop an integrated marketing communications campaign that's consistent messaging, that has a consistent brand and feel to it, and that gets your message across that you've identified as your value proposition earlier on. Service and warranty is what you do to provide in terms of service or warranty for product. This is really all about how are you going to retain customers? How are you addressing customer issues? Do you have loyalty programs? Do you have incentives for customers to be repeat customers and to repurchase your product or your service? And so this all kind of wraps up a larger marketing plan section. And this is a really big section of the business plan, and it can be broken down into way more depth than it usually is. But this is just a quick high-level overview of that. But it's a great starting point. This third big section is this operations and financial section. Beginning with the human resource plan, the biggest assets to any company are its people, the key employees, the policies that you have in place. Who is your management team? And most importantly, why is this the right team to lead your business to success? What relevant experience does your team have? What does the future growth of your team look like? Who is the first person, or not necessarily the person, but the first role that you're going to need to hire for as you grow? Is it an admin person? Is it a finance expert? Is it a sales team? It's important to know that as part of your growth and planning purposes. Who are these key employees? What are their positions? Do you have any policies in place to protect them or to incentivize them or to keep them as part of your team? The next is that action plan. Action plan meaning, how are you, okay, we've now developed who our team is, we've developed a marketing plan, we've defined who and our target market is and what we're selling. Now, how are we actually going to go out there and implement it? How are we going to execute? How are we going to grow? And what does the timeline look like for this? The absolute best visual, and I love to see them in business plans, is a Gantt chart to represent the actual implementation, scalability, and timeline of your plan. So it's really about what's your supply chain look like? What's your distribution strategy? Who are your key suppliers and resources that you need in order to bring this product to life and to keep that going and keep growing? And how do you support and grow that? How does that change over time? Then there's the legal and corporate structure. So this is talking about what are the legal and or intellectual property components to your business? Is the business incorporated? Is it a partnership? What are the share classes, or how many shares are issued if it's a corporation? What are the terms of a partnership, or who's involved in the partnership? Who's the shareholders? Does the business have any intellectual property? And how, if so, how are you protecting it? Do you have a patent? Do you have a trademark? Is a lawyer being consulted? There's a ton of different questions that need to be answered when it comes to the legal side of a business. And what's important to note is whether you think it or not, every business has IP, has intellectual property, whether it's your name, whether it's a slogan, whether it's your software, whether it's your product, whatever it is, every business has IP, and it's important to protect it. And it's important to have a plan around protecting it. So don't overlook that stage. Even if you think you don't have anything to protect, you probably do. Then that last piece to this big section is the financial analysis. So looking at from an overview, including what's the capital structure and funding that's needed. What are your people costs and the revenue model? How are you generating revenue? What's your price, your sales price? What are your profit margins? The sources and uses of funds are really if you need money or you have money, how much is it? Where are you getting it from? And what exactly is that money being spent on? Super important, especially if you have an external business plan that you're using to go to raise financing. An investor or a banker, whoever wants to see A, how much money are you asking for and you need, and B, how exactly are you going to spend all of that money? Because as an investor, if you come to and say, if you say, hey, I need $100,000, but don't tell the investor how you're going to spend that money, well, they're not going to give you the money. You don't want them to think that it's just going to all be used to pay your salary or to write a big bonus to your management team. You have to show how you're going to spend that and the value back to the investor and how you're spending their money, for example, and a bank operates the same way. Super important section. The other one to that is actually doing out financial projections. It is so important to be able to predict and forecast what revenues you might bring in for your business, what expenses you're going to have, from everything from rent costs to technology costs to your actual product costs, the salaries and people that you have, and every other day-to-day operational expense of your business, legal and accounting fees. Everything has to be considered, and you need to show that in a chart. What I'll mention too is we and I have built, as part of the Venture Coach role, a number of resources and templates for this, such as an Excel document of financial projections. Happy to share that with you. Happy to share the business plan template with you as well in the infographic. Just reach out and ask. Super important to get all these sections properly detailed though. And this last big section is the conclusion and the appendix. So these are really your supporting items. Your conclusion is that strong conclusion to the business plan, really overall re-summarizing the key components and the key parts. The appendix following that is really the place to add any kind of supporting documents and images. There's no rule as to what to put in the appendix or what not to put in the appendix, but essentially the more you put in the appendix, the more meat, the more value it provides. Anything to support anything that you've said in your plan, whether it be, obviously, if you've done research, to have your references there and resources that you've used. Any graphs, data, visuals are a great thing to do. A SWOT analysis, for example, that Gantt chart that I mentioned, different pricing structures, your financial projections, employee resumes, anything that's going to support what you've written in your business plan, put in the appendix. The appendix can be as heavy and as big as you want. As long as it's supportive, good material, it's going to be helpful in any way, shape, or form. With that being said, that's really the very quick high-level overview of the key components of a business plan. But there are some other essentials to it, such as a title page, a disclaimer, a table of contents, being able to sort and organize the document nicely. And I say this because it might seem pretty straightforward, but it's actually very important. The professional look of a business plan and a document, especially if it's being used for external purposes or internal purposes, it needs to look professional. It needs to be easy to read for a reader. And some of these items are sometimes overlooked, but super, super important. For example, having a disclaimer such as this as an example, right on the second page of the business plan is important, because in a business plan, you have important information about your plan, and the business plan itself can be a form of intellectual property on your business. It's your strategy. It's your plan to build your company. And you need to have a disclaimer that shares that, someone can't disclose this information if they're reading it. And it's important to have a disclaimer as part of a business plan. So I would highly encourage you to make sure and consider that that's in place for your plan. I mentioned a table of contents. A lot of the times it's so nice when you get an electronic business plan to have them linked to the sections within the document. So if I just hover over and click executive summary, or I click legal, it's going to take me to that part of the document. Again, it makes it interactive and easier for the reader to understand and to read and to get to the section that they want to and need to be able to see. The last one on that list was the use of headings and really making it look professional. Use headings, subheadings, indents, so important, again, for the reader to be able to understand and analyze a business plan, as well as to jump to sections that are of most important. I'll be honest, when I get a business plan, I don't just read from start to finish. I look at a couple key different parts at the beginning, and that's where I start my focus on. And the best way to do that is if there are headings that I can then sort and manage my way around from the business plan. So super important to do that. With all that being said, it's so important to note that regardless of what business you're in or what idea you have or what product you're selling or what stage in your business you're at, every business needs a plan. Don't skip it. You don't need to have a 20, 30, 40, 50 page business plan. You don't need to, but you need a plan, and you need something written that shows that you've given thought to every single one of those components that we've talked about today. You have to consider those key components. It can look differently, but don't ever skip the planning step, as it's really key to building that foundation of your business. That being said, we're going to talk about the lean canvas, because the lean canvas is a great starting point to the build of a business plan. A lean canvas is a one-page business plan template that was created by Ash Mora that helps you to deconstruct your idea into its key assumptions and really optimize for lean startups. We talked about that second way and type to identify a business plan, lean versus standard. And lean is really that first high-level overview plan that can be developed. This lean canvas replaces elaborate business plans with a single-page business model. 4 things. Lean canvas is fast. Compared to writing a business plan, which can take several weeks or months, you can outline multiple possible business models on a canvas in one afternoon, in a matter of an hour, probably. So it's fast. The second pro to the lean canvas is that it's portable. A single-page business model is way easier to share with others, and more people will read it, rather than a 20, 30, 40-page document, even a 10-page document. So it's much more portable. It's a single page and more enticing for someone else to read too. The third pro is it's concise. It's to the point. A lean canvas forces you to distill the essence of your product. If you have 30 seconds to grab the attention of an investor over in an elevator, for example, and 8 seconds to grab the attention of a customer on your landing page of your website, the lean canvas is the same thing. This is your quick, concise way to have the most important pieces of information on one page that someone can actually understand. And it forces you as an entrepreneur to be concise and to really understand and know your business better than anyone else. The last big pro to the lean canvas is that it's effective. Whether you're pitching an investor or you're giving an update to your team or to your board, using a lean canvas can be used for all of that. It's effective. It can be used for so many different things. Any type of business plan that we talked about, external, internal, lean, standard, the lean canvas, this one pager, can be used for all of those purposes to some degree. So why do we talk about the lean canvas? Because if you don't know where to start, or you're looking to start, you start here. You start with the lean canvas because of these 4 main reasons. So what does a lean canvas look like? This is a lean canvas, and this is a fillable PDF that I have. So if you'd like a copy, feel free to reach out and can share this template with you. But again, it's a one-pager, and it forces you to break down each of those key components and sections of a business into one page. So the problem, what's your top 3 problems? Bullet point, what problems are you solving? What are the existing alternatives that are currently exist on the marketplace? Your solution, what are the top 3 features of your solution? The key metrics, how are you going to measure success? Is it by revenue? Is it about your social media following? Is the key metric how much traffic you drive to your website? What's the key metrics you're going to measure? What's the unique value proposition? We talked about how important it is to have a clear, concise, compelling statement that says what your value is. So that's your opportunity to write it there. What's your unfair advantage? What gives you a competitive advantage? If you're starting a business and your uncle is Elon Musk, well, that's probably an unfair advantage to everyone else because you have access to him maybe as an investor or his knowledge or his connections. That's a value to you. What are your channels? What's your path to your customers to actually reach them? Those customer segments, who are those customers and where are they? Where do they exist? Do you reach them through Instagram? Do you reach them through online advertising? Do you reach them through mail out handouts? And then those last two structures on the bottom there, cost and revenue. So understanding what are the costs, what are you going to have to pay for to bring your product to the client, salaries, cost of materials, rent, legal, accounting fees, and how are you going to make money? What are you selling your product or service for? What profit margin are you selling it at? And is it a one-time fee or is it a recurring revenue model like a subscription? That's the lean canvas. That's all it is. It's one page. But again, it forces you to think about all of those key components of a business plan. And the great thing to start with the lean canvas is because if you start by writing this out, it becomes so much easier. For example, if you then need to go write a 15, 20-page business plan, you already have this. It makes it so much easier to actually write out a really, really high-quality business plan. So it's a fantastic starting point. At the end of the day, planning is foundational to your business. As I say on every webinar and to every client and student of mine, you cannot build a successful business with a flawed foundation. Whether you write out a full business plan or not, you have to consider all of the key elements that we talked about today when starting a business. It is absolutely crucial. Planning is the foundational pieces of your business, and you can't continue to grow and scale without a plan in place, because at some point it will catch up to you and you won't be able to do it. So what are today's key takeaways? First and foremost, every business needs a plan. Don't skip the planning stage. Understand why you're writing a business plan and what purpose it will fulfill before you even begin and start to write it. Whether you write out a full business plan or not, every entrepreneur needs to think and consider all these key areas and components of the business plan. Use the appendix to provide supporting data. It's really an amazing tool that gets overlooked by a lot of entrepreneurs. The appendix is your place to pack in so much more concrete information and data and visuals to support what it is you're doing. Remember to format your business plan professionally. Use headings, table of contents. It sounds simple, but it's so important. Make sure it looks professional. It feels professional. Start your planning process with the lean canvas. It's an amazing tool to start. And lastly, but certainly not least, you cannot build a successful business with a flawed foundation, and your plan is foundational step number one. We understand as entrepreneurs, you can't do it alone. There's so many great resources in the community to help you and through your entrepreneurial journey. On the screen are just some of our community resources and partners at the Stu Clark Center. Remember, you're never alone, and no matter what stage you're at in the business planning cycle, there is help and support for you in our community. At the Stu Clark Center, we're happy to be that connector for you to some of these or to any of these community partners, as well as any others out there. So feel free to reach out again to us. Don't hesitate. Everything we offer is 100% free at the Stu Clark Center for students, and we're happy to connect you to other resources if there's something that we cannot help you with ourselves. Before we get to any questions that you might have, next on October 13th, we're talking about preparing and delivering the perfect pitch. So feel free to RSVP, register today, and join us on October 13th for our next webinar. But with that being said, I would love to open it up for any questions that anyone might have.